Ladies and gentlemen,
They say the next big thing is here.
the Steve Warnicki Show.
Hey everybody, welcome. I am Steve Warnicki. Happy New Year! 2018 is going to be awesome for all of us, I'm sure. All right, special guests on the podcast. I'm sure you recognize Dustin Duff. We worked together at the Denver Police Department for several years. He's since left and is a realtor. That's what we had in common. We both left the job and we both went to go do real estate. And now I'm doing this. That tells you how it went for me. And Dustin is killing it at Remax Momentum over there. All right.
No, thanks for having us, brother. We've been loving your house down here in Florida.
Yeah, I mean, this has been a lot of guests down here. It's been really great to have you guys come down. And wife Jenna Duff is here with us also. Thanks for being here.
You're welcome. Thanks for having me.
Yeah. So Dustin, you might remember, did a podcast with us, a law enforcement one. We worked together at the Denver Police Department for many years. And Dustin, we got talking this trip, and we thought of another great idea that could enlighten people as to what it's like to be a cop, what the processes are, what goes on inside the families and the minds of critical, especially in critical incidents of police officers. So we thought we'd talk about that incident today. And I think one of the things you're going to hear today is we're going to get to hear the perspective of the spouse of a police officer involved in a critical incident. And I think you'll be surprised because these things take hours and hours to resolve, what it was like. And we get to hear from you, Jenna, today after Dustin tells us about his incident. All right?
Right.
All right, so just to give everybody a little bit of background, this incident occurred back on August 1st, 2010 at about 2:46 in the afternoon. Denver police call takers in the 911 Communications Center received a call from an individual later identified as Alfred Raymond Vigil. After several minutes on the phone, it was discovered he was suicidal and was making suicidal statements that was relayed to you, the officers. And Dustin, I don't want to tell your story, so I'll have you do it for us.
Well, you already said the date. So, we were just out on patrol like any other day. I mean, it started like every other day. And a guy with a gun call comes out, over on Morrison Road. And, I was on a specialized unit at the time, so I didn't necessarily have to go to the call, but I realized that only one guy had said he was going to go to the call. So I said, well, I'll just go make sure that he's all right. And that's kind of how it kicked off. And, we just responded to basically a guy with a gun call. I mean, obviously there's a lot more radio traffic, but it was, that's the most simple part about it.
What are you told en route? What happens next?
Yeah. So when you're en route, I mean, we were getting a lot of different radio traffic. He was on the phone with the call taker for a long, long time. Mm-hmm. And so, we were getting a little bits and pieces, but the hardest thing was when I got there, there was a cop that was there already. Right. So he had went code 6, which is, you're at the scene. And so when I pulled up, he had pulled up in the drive. It was like a row of houses, like row housing, basically. It was a one-way directional driveway coming, towards where we had pulled in at. So the cars were angled that way. And then as I pulled up, the last thing I had heard was he has the gun in his hand, hold the air, which was the other officer that was there. And so at that point, I went running up the drive behind his car, and that's where I saw him over there with a gun in his hand.
So you're second on scene, and it gave me goosebumps just now when you said hold the air. He's got the gun in his hand, because I imagine and there's something really powerful about police radio traffic. That when you hear it, it gives me goosebumps, probably just from all the PTSD, right? But. Right. So you hear that, so he's got the gun. I mean, you're getting out of your car, another officer's there, but you don't know what you're going to find. But right when you get out of the car, you hear that, like, this is real, he's got the gun. And that's what your final moment is, exiting your police car.
Yeah, and there's that lag time. The police radios that we had at the department, you turn it on, it feels like forever when you're in an incident like that. But from the time I got out of the car, I can't hear the radio in the car anymore. And for that thing to boot up, you're so zeroed in on the, what's going on now. And you're all game now.
And what's going through your mind when you get out of the car? Now, because a lot of calls turn out not to be anything, right? So they're going to, it's a false alarm, or, it ends up resolving itself in a matter of seconds. But like, Are you thinking at this point like this is for real?
Well, you're right. There's a lot of bogus calls, that we go on or we hear, radio traffic or whatever coming out. And so, your mind's almost dead when you first get there because you're like, is this really happening? You know what I mean? Like, is this guy really standing in front of me? So, until you kind of get back to, and I think cops are really good at this about getting back to what I call getting back to zero, being able to function and do what you need to do, take care of the call, stuff like that. Until you get back to zero, you kind of it's almost like dead air in your head. You just, you're kind of just reacting to what's going on in the situation. So, I went zero and we ended up taking more positions by the cars, starting to go into the groove of the police thing, moving up, doing this, getting a better angle on the guy that had the gun. Because a big reason, if he's suicidal and he has that gun, there were literally kids down the driveway from where we were at. And so, public safety, not only our safety, but public safety is a major concern at that point.
Yeah, man, that's a great point to touch on. I think there are people out there would say, well, he's suicidal, he's not threatening anybody. What's the need to confront this person? But I mean, you as a police officer with the duty to guard and protect the citizens of the city have an obligation to not let him go into any houses armed with a gun or to go get hostages or be in, anywhere where he could make this worse. I mean, you have to mitigate, contain this situation and not let it get any bigger than it already is.
Yeah, don't let him victimize other people, down the drive.
And there's so much that goes into your layout. I mean, we won't get into all the tactics of it, but you really have to be thinking about crossfire situations and what the training is and where is everybody else at and where are the children and where are the houses and where are the things we can't see. And you're really trying to evaluate all of this while you're watching this guy who's holding a gun, potentially threatening himself and you and everybody else.
Right.
So what happens next?
So obviously we'll keep it to a semi-short version, of it. But we had taken positions basically all around him at different stages. He was suicidal. We were all CIT trained, so we were, the department put all of us through this training to be able to deal with people with mental illness.
Yeah, they teach you methodology to deal with them because they were trying to come up with a way. Maybe you could talk them out of it instead of this, the antiquated, like you just pull up and you get in a shootout right away, right? You're trying to resolve this peacefully.
Correct.
Okay.
Yeah. And so we had taken those positions, and there's multiple guys on scene by now. I was the second guy in. There was a third and a fourth that came to the scene. We're all taking turns trying to get this individual to communicate with us first off, because we hadn't established any communication, wouldn't get off the phone. So we're all, not stepping on each other, but each of us are saying a command or trying to get him to talk to us, but none of us were talking at the same time. So that, so we wouldn't get confused. And finally, after it felt like an eternity, but after, I would probably say about 5 to 8 minutes, somewhere in there, is when he finally decided he was going to, make communication with me. Cause I said, well, do you even speak English? Because maybe he didn't in that part of town. And at that point he looked right at me and said, don't I look like I speak fucking English to you? And so that was at least our first part of the communication.
I think it's a good strategy personally, especially if you're not having any luck communicating, to try a bunch of different people and to also make sure you're all not shouting at him simultaneously is the overwhelming situation. You're hoping one of you can get through, even if it's in an incident like that. It could be construed like, well, maybe you made him angry, but you broke the ice. You get it, and you find out something about him, and that's that he does comprehend English at that point.
Right.
Okay.
Yeah.
So I mean, even if he doesn't comply to your commands, you've learned something important, I think.
Right. Yeah. So we gave him multiple commands. I think the tape, it was either 11 or 13 minutes we talked to him, through this whole incident. And so, I mean, we were talking a lot, and anybody that thinks that, oh, that's not a very long time, try having your adrenaline dumping at, level 20, for 11 minutes and see how well you fare. But anyway.
That's an incredible, in the academy, they put us through like a 3-minute adrenaline dump scenario, which is just completely taxing. 11's just got to be, especially on your body. I mean, it's just,
yeah.
Are you tired? Do you have tunnel vision? A lot of people talk about tunnel vision where you're focused on something narrow. Is any of that happening in your mind?
Not me. I can't speak for the other guys that were there, and how they personally dealt with it. During the incident, I was totally fine. I could have told you how long the grass was, how many, how the clouds were, if there was overcast. I mean, I could be pretty descriptive because of my background, and operating on high amounts of adrenaline all the time. But after following the incident, he did end up swinging the gun and pointing it at me. Was the first person he pointed at, and that's what caused the incident to go down like it did. But afterwards, all I remember is that I could have drinking like 20 gallons of water because my tongue's sticking to the roof of my mouth. I'm like shaking, going up this roller coaster of emotions, and it's like, you're so sad, you're scared, you're this, you're that. And for whatever reason, I don't know if it's the chemicals trying to get out of your body or what, but then it would go back up. And for some reason you were kind of like happy that it was over, but then like 2 seconds later you'd crash again. And it was like, you can't understand like what's going on even in your own body. Cause you could put a face on and, be very still, but inside, I don't care what anybody says, inside your head, you're going, a million miles a minute, and people are showing up, and, there's tape going up, and there's, don't call him, don't do this, stand over here. Your casings are there. Don't move from there until we tell you to move, and it's very rigid.
So you said caused the incident to go down like it did. You ended up firing. I have the shoot letter here from the district attorney's office. Sounds like every officer there fired.
And the suspect Vigil was killed.
Yes. Yeah.
And a lot of people may actually say, why do you all have to fire? This is a great opportunity because that's the kind of stuff you hear, right? Especially from non-police officers. Why are all of you shooting, right? Why can't one of you shoot and stuff? You want to answer that?
When you're scared for your life, because I feel like I was the first person in the line of where the cops were, right? So how we kind of went around and behind these cars, I was like the guy all the way to the left, essentially, right? So he came up with his right hand and started to swing it. So obviously I'm the first person that's going to cross.
Yeah.
So not only am I afraid for my life, now all these other officers are afraid he's going to shoot me. He's going to shoot at me. And then if anybody's, that's fallen victim to this, anybody can attest that you don't have to be good at shooting. You just got to get lucky, and that bullet can go off of a car into me, into one of the other guys if he doesn't shoot when he gets, there are so many variables that, at that point, I just, you want to go home. That's all you want to do.
And I think, you have several officers all perceiving a threat simultaneously. There isn't time to go, Bob, you got this one? No, Dave hasn't, let's let Dave do it. He's got the bet. You don't have time for this kind of coordination and planning. You're all trying to talk this guy out of whatever he's going to do. Only he knows. You don't know what he's going to do. Right. Only he knows. You want to get him to put the gun down. You want to resolve it peacefully. All of a sudden, you perceive a life-threatening threat to you instantaneously. The first thing you're going to do is act. All of a sudden, at the same time, the other officers think, oh, like Dustin's in danger right now. We have to do something.
Right.
And I thought it spoke to the incident that everybody pretty much at the same time, it sounds like, perceived the same threat. So now you have independent people, all with training, different vantage points, all perceived a similar threat, which was the threat of death, serious bodily injury to you as a gunshot wound.
Correct.
Okay.
Yeah.
Now, you segued a little bit into the protocol about what happens when an officer is involved after an officer-involved shooting. It can be several hours. I was part of them as a supervisor. Officers are separated and escorted down by supervisors. Typically, there's a supervisor with each officer that was either a witness or involved, and will take you down. But it's hours, right? Well, you are, as the involved officer, interviewed last in the process from the city in which we came from.
Yep, I was the second to last guy. So they do. You're correct. So they show up on the scene, supervisors, lieutenants, everybody, start IA, everybody starts showing up to the scene. And they had told me, stand where you were standing when you fired your weapon. The reason being is your casings and stuff are around you. They want to be able to track what casings belong to which officer, who shot how many times, what direction, all that stuff. So, and then I was taken by a supervisor, but while I was standing there, a friend showed up to the scene. Officers are all tight, but you always have your like little clique that you're kind of, you're really tight with. And a good friend showed up to the scene, and, I had asked him, I was so terrified. I was so kind of confused, and I don't know, just a lot of emotions going on, that I asked him, to call my wife and stuff. And right after that, is when I was transported downtown, where I was basically put in a room all by myself with one other person. And, you know, you had people come in to see if you needed water or anything, but I mean, you feel like you're in a jail cell until they start, you know, taking you, and they take your gun and count your rounds, and I mean, just all kinds of stuff, you know.
So you don't just go into a TV room, kick your feet up, turn the TV on, pick up the phone, start calling your friends and family, telling them what's been going on. You're escorted down. You're put in a room by yourself after a critical incident, which I would imagine is also fairly difficult.
Yeah. Well, so the supervisor that took you down, typically they're in charge of you.
Right.
So they're in charge of anybody who comes in contact with you. They have a sheet of paper. They're supposed to write the name down. This person saw this officer, you know, at this time.
And do you, at this point, decide that you want to call Jenna and let her know what's happened and potentially going to be home late, that you're okay? Tell us about that.
Yeah, so I asked one of my buddies to call her on her cell phone, you know, and I gave him the number because my phone I leave in the car. I used to leave in the car all the time in the visor. So he called her, but right after that, I was transported. So my communication with anybody other than the person I was assigned to basically was stopped. So I didn't know if he had reached her or not. I just wanted that call to go out to her, you know.
And we talked about this before we were taping, but I mean, I only know like 3 or 4 cell phone numbers by heart because I've used. So you did happen to know Jenna's number by heart, thankfully.
By some act of God.
So Jenna, we'll bring you in here. Thanks for doing this.
You're welcome.
What is your day like before you get this phone call?
Well, I was having a normal day. I was coming back from being out of town, actually, and my phone rang, and I didn't answer it because I didn't recognize the phone number, and it went to voicemail, and I listened to it, and an officer had told me that Dustin was in a shooting, and on that message, it didn't say if he'd been shot, if somebody had, if he was just there during a shooting, if somebody shot him. I didn't have any clue, and so without having any way to get hold of him, I thought for a couple hours that he had been shot. And I just didn't know. I had no clue what to do at that point.
And where are you at this point?
I was in my car. I was driving home from the mountains, actually.
And so you're driving home, which is a couple-hour drive.
Yeah.
You get this voice message. You're not able to get a hold of anybody right away?
No,
or?
I called the number back and nobody answered. And I didn't know if I should call hospitals or if somebody was going to contact me. I didn't know if I was going to get home and there would have been a police officer at my house. I just didn't have any clue.
And so this goes on for an hour or two?
Yeah, probably about an hour and a half. I don't.
Yeah.
It seemed like longer than that, but
What are you thinking during this time?
I just I didn't know. I think I also had some adrenaline, and I kind of went into shock a little bit because I got home just fine. Pulled the car in the garage like normal, let the dogs out. I just kind of tried to do what was normal for me until I could have some control over the situation.
I actually think that's pretty advanced of her to be like, listen, I just need to try to keep myself, because you could just go into meltdown mode.
Right.
But I have a feeling, as the wife of a cop, that you have been a little of this how to handle a critical incident stuff has
Yeah.
come over to you. You've learned how to do it.
I would say that.
So you're just doing the best you can. Are you trying to keep the thoughts out of your head, or how does it feel?
I don't even remember the first few hours. I really think it was sheer panic, but trying not to overreact and then I did get a phone call later saying, no, he had not been shot, that he wasn't a shooting, and that he would be contacting me, but nobody knows when. I mean, it could have been an hour, 2 hours. There was again, I was just kind of left hanging, but at least at that point I knew he was safe.
I wasn't involved in your incident, Dustin, but I've been involved in a few. Did anybody offer to call Jenna, and you said, I'd already had it taken care of, thinking that or
somebody might have, but after I left the scene, it was like total panic in my head, so.
All right. So tell us about the call where you find out he's okay. Who calls you? And
another police officer, one of his close friends, called. It was his cell phone that had called me, and he said, I can't tell you details, but basically he'll be calling you when they're done interviewing him. He's safe. He'll be home tonight. But no detectives, no sergeants, or anybody contacted me.
And what are you feeling now? Like,
well, I kind of go into, what do I need to do to make this situation go smoother? So I think I've mentioned this to you before, but I cleaned. was like, well, we're probably going to have people coming over. So I'm going to clean. And it just gave me something to do. Because it's, I didn't know, do you sit on the couch and watch TV? Do you cry? What do you do? So it just kind of calmed me and made me feel more in control to clean and just kind of wait. And my mom came over and we just kind of sat there.
Oh, your mom came over.
Yeah, my mom finally came over because nobody was home at that time. So I was able to get a hold of people. It took me a while to call.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't know. I knew as soon as I talked to somebody like my mom or my dad that I would kind of lose it.
Well, I think that's a common phenomenon. You're going to find that when people go through something, that they'll do something that they do have control over, and it makes them feel better. I think that's actually perfectly normal. Mm-hmm. If anybody thinks that sounds strange, I actually, cleaning calms me down greatly. So you're speaking my language with that one for sure. So what happens next? What's the next you hear then?
He called me when he was done with the interview, and
how long after the incident is this? Do you guys think?
It was forever. It was forever for me. I was just sitting there waiting. It's dark out.
Yeah, mine. This one was just a little bit shorter than some of the ones that I had seen, and the ones. I mean, there's ones where there's tons of witnesses and it takes forever. Ours was probably about, from the time we shot to the time we got out, about 9 hours. I was off. I always remember I was thinking I'm getting off on time because our shift was 12 to 10 while I was on the specialized unit, and so we had come in and it happened right after I had come on duty. So I ended up getting out of there around 10. I can't remember if it was like 10:30 or so. So it was a good 9 hours from the time she heard anything.
And what are you thinking about during this whole process?
You're terrified. I mean, it's not normal to kill another person, right? I mean, it doesn't matter if you're in your job, even vets, that have a real hard time with PTSD. A lot of that plays into it. Killing another human being in this day and age, it's not. We're not in tribal days anymore. I mean, we're not in the old West. Like, it's not a natural human thing to do, is take the life of another person.
So you didn't just shoot this guy and blow the smoke off your barrel, carve another notch in your belt, and go about your day with a toothpick in your mouth.
No, that's the furthest thing. That's the furthest thing from the truth.
It is, right? And do you feel like that's what a lot of America thinks that is going on after these shootings?
Yeah.
I really feel like a lot of America just forgets that these are human beings dealing with human beings, and nobody really wins in a situation like yours, Dustin, honestly. No. I mean, it's just a lose-lose situation. You're part of it. The only thing you can do is mitigate the loss. So either you or multiple officers end up dead and he dies, or he kills kids and neighbors and cops and himself, or you're just trying to mitigate what he's decided on doing as an adult.
Right.
All right.
You just feel terrible about it, that you got put in this position. You get mad at the person, he wanted, it came out like he wanted to, suicide, right? So he put us in that position, and I mean, it was sheer panic. Am I going to prison? Like, what am I going to do? Are they going to sit me on the desk, or
what do you say to somebody right now that would say, well, why would you think you're going to prison? You did something wrong. What would you say to them?
Because just like we talked about, that's taking another human being's life is not a natural human thing. Whether it's for your job or not, you can tell yourself you're okay with it until you're blue in the face. But when you look yourself in the mirror at night, you still had to take that action, right?
Yeah.
And so you may be totally justified. We were totally justified, but you cannot help that thought that comes across your head that, oh my gosh, I'm going to get in so much trouble for this,
Well, and I think that's really the point that I want to drill home here is I don't care what the situation was, how righteous it was. There's not a person alive that's going to think like, what if this doesn't work out for me? What if I'm in trouble? Or what if something, what if I lose everything? Or just because that's a normal human emotion.
Right.
So, I mean, on top of being through this 11-minute adrenaline dump event, and then being sequestered and all of these other things, and then you're just trapped alone with these thoughts and angers and emotions and all this and everything. So you get out 9-10 hours later, and you're not going to come back to work the next day, but they put you on a temporary leave, right?
Right, 3 days, yeah.
Mm-hmm. So what do you do when you leave? You're supposed to go home and kick on the TV?
That's what you're supposed to do, but...
So when you leave headquarters after the shooting, where do you go next?
I actually ended up going to a childhood friend of mine's house. It was out on the way home, and ended up stopping there, and I called her and had her meet me over there because I just wasn't ready to go home yet. I needed to try to clear the mind before I head home.
That's interesting. Yeah, because I think a lot of people would want to get home, but why didn't you want to go directly to your house?
It's weird because it's a lot of like emotions going on and everything, but I wasn't ready to go home because I didn't want, I think subconsciously I felt like I was taking it there, and I wasn't ready. I hadn't put it to bed enough yet before I could go to my own house. I didn't want to drag that to my house, so we went there and we were actually there until like 4 a.m.
Jenna, so he calls you, and does your mom come with you, or do you go?
No, she'd gone home.
Okay.
At that point.
Are you relieved to be able to see him? Are you perplexed that he's not coming home?
No, I didn't expect him to, just because I know him so well, but I was nervous because I didn't know how he would be. I didn't know if he would be crying. I didn't know what to expect when I saw him.
And what did you see when you saw him?
He was pretty calm, but just kind of had this like empty look in his eye. Like when something bad happens, you either cry or you just kind of, if something's happened bad to you, you just kind of sit there and you're like, you can tell you're deep in thought. It was kind of awkward because I didn't know what to say.
Yeah.
I can't say it's going to be okay because it's not. There wasn't a lot of talking. It was a lot of just kind of sitting.
I mean, Dustin, you're the one that went through that. That may actually be nice. Sometimes you're not in the mood to talk. You just need a loving person's hand on your shoulder. You just need, a hug from your wife, or you just need to, there's not a lot anybody's going to be able to say to make it better for you.
No, there's nothing really you can take out. That is so heavy. It's so heavy on your mind. There's nothing that's going to, change. Maybe there's, bad things in your own family or something that, that would shake that. But, just talking about normal words and to just normal conversation, there's just nothing you can, make that, just put it in the back of your mind and like it didn't happen.
Do you have a sense of relief when you see Jenna? Do you remember this moment at all?
Yeah. I was relieved that it was over and I was away from, all the way out of Denver, out of everything, right? I was just happy to be away from that whole thing. But the thought is still in your mind. They could call me tomorrow and say, hey, come back down and we need you to clarify something else or something, that someone could drag it in. You're just waiting because, that's just how it always feels.
And you're there until 4 a.m. So that's quite a while.
Yeah.
And you're up with him the whole time?
Yes.
How do you know when it's time to finally go home?
When I actually got tired.
Okay.
Yeah.
So you eventually physically you just,
right.
That's a long time. Think about how long it took for the adrenaline to burn out of your body.
Oh, yeah.
That at 4 a.m. you're just now getting tired and your body is spent right after exerting.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. No. And you crash and it was like total crash by the time I got home. It was.
Jenna, what's the day like? Dustin said trying to treat, obviously can't go back to total normalcy, but just try to get up and have a normal breakfast, or what's that like?
Well, there's no protocol for this for people. When somebody dies in your family, there's kind of like people know what happens. I didn't know what to do. I said, I went to work the next day and left him because I didn't know. Was I supposed to stay home? Does he need time to be alone? I just didn't know. So I got up after being up till 4 a.m. and went and taught middle school all day. And it was probably the hardest day I've ever had because your mind is obviously elsewhere and you can't tell anybody what happened. Mm-hmm. And so it felt very alone, and I felt like I probably made the wrong choice, but you don't really know what to do.
Mm-hmm. Well, it seemed to be your way of coping with it to try to just keep yourself going, doing the things that you normally do. Maybe that was good for you. Looking back on it, do you think you would have done anything differently?
Yeah, I definitely would have stayed home with him, and he probably didn't want to talk at that point, but it would have probably been better for him if I had been there.
How long do you think it takes before things start to feel normal for you? You're off from work for a few days. There's a bunch of protocol. You have to go shoot your weapon. You have to talk to a police psychologist. There's things that have to happen while you're doing that. But what's the next few days like for you?
You're just still worried. When your first question, how long does it take you to get back to totally normal? And it's not normal until you get that letter in your hand, and then you're like, okay, here we go. All right. That's over. The investigation's over,
So this letter was written August 26th of 2010. That's actually really fast. I've seen decisional letters take 6, 7, 8, 9+ months to be rendered, but this was actually pretty fast.
Yeah, it was really quick.
These letters, by the way, and I talk about this at great extent. I mean, the Denver protocol for officer-involved shootings is one of the best in the country, and the Denver District Attorney's Office has these online. I mean, these are public record. You're able to read their conclusions, a description of the facts, and Denver's always done that. It is a very transparent system, and so that you can see why district attorneys made the decisions they did and why they believe, shootings to be justified. But I think, having that come back, just because it's not back in 3 or 4 months or, in 20 days, right? Doesn't necessarily mean there was something wrong. Could be a more complex investigation, but that's interesting to hear that was kind of the peace of mind you needed.
Yeah. Once I got that, I felt like I could get back to normal. I just have one thing I want to go over real quick, just because I know a lot of cops watch this. The worst thing they can do, your family-wise, okay, guys, just to, because I know what made me feel bad, was the following day. I called everybody over the house. I said, I'm going to tell this story one time so you guys know what happened. Obviously, I didn't get details, but, to a certain degree to air that so they weren't, scared about asking me about certain things or whatever. I didn't want that in there. But I remember the next day when people were showing up, it felt like they were walking on eggshells around me. And that's what bothered me a lot about my family, is because I felt like I hurt them. And you know what I mean? Mm-hmm. So if you're a family of an officer and you go through something like this, you don't have to necessarily act normal, but don't deviate so far where they feel like they're weird or they're wrong, because they're just dealt with a crazy crap pot ton of emotions, that their body's still trying to get regular again,
There's a chapter in my book, and one of the things I focus about when I talk about law enforcement stuff is just how long this stuff lingers on. I mean, the shooting took moments to occur, but, days, weeks, months, and even years down the road, I mean, do you wake up with flashbacks? Do you think about this often? Like, what does it take to move beyond something like this?
Until you get it right in your head, you're going to be dealing with the baggage of it. There was first couple months there is, it would rear its head a little bit every now and then, it's just natural things. You could just be cutting your grass, and for some reason it would pop into your head that happened or something, So
yeah.
Not saying like you obsess over it, but it was weird the times that you would like think about it. It's like things that it's nothing cop related, anything. It was, it was just like doing something, and for whatever reason, it's like your brain was trying to get over it itself, So.
Oh, absolutely. Well, that's a proven thing. I mean, your brain does need. You actually have to work through it, because if you bury the flashbacks, you can create PTSD kind of thing. But did either of you do anything differently in the weeks and months following the shooting to maybe help yourselves heal a little bit or to deal with this?
Well, I mean, we would, for the first couple years on the anniversary, the guys that I was in that with, we got together and, kind of like an anniversary thing, but thank God we're still alive, more than anything. So
I think people that go through critical incidents together become close. I mean, you look at people that have survived plane crashes, or people that have been lost in mountains together, or people that, whatever the case may be, those friendships, and you see this in non-police involved stuff, people that were taken hostage before. There's people that, do a thing with Sully Sullenberger's Miracle on the Hudson, where they, talk about that every year. There's a closeness, a relationship when you go through something, a critical event where you almost lose your life with somebody, that does create a closeness. Does that help? Is that part of the healing? Does that help you get through it?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, you're not alone, so you don't have that alone feeling. I can't talk about cops that had those incidents by themselves, because maybe they don't have that support. But you can definitely tell, and believe me, I don't make the comparison. There's, the police force is not the military by any means, but I see why those guys are so tight when they come back from war and I mean, all those things, because they have to be crazy tight, because I mean, we did create a bond that day. I mean, that was something that bonded, us four. So, that's why I feel worse for the guys coming back from war and stuff. Cause I mean, they had to deal with even heavier stuff than that, but yeah, so we've created that bond.
Jen, any final thoughts from you? Was there recovery on your end?
I didn't do anything specific, even though I probably should have. I think counseling is always available for the officers involved, but oftentimes the families don't take initiative to do any of that. And looking back, I probably should have. I still, to this day, like when I see a shooting on the news, it takes me back to that day. I'm like, oh, I know what they're about to go through, and I still haven't quite gotten through that, and probably never will.
Yeah. Well, thank you both for being here. I appreciate your time on the podcast. Jenna, thanks.
You're welcome. Thank you.
We'll hope to see you again down here soon.
Yes.
All right. Dustin, thanks for being here. I know we'll see you back here again soon. So he's been a couple times. All it takes is once down here, folks, to South Florida. And that's why almost 1,000 people a day are moving to this peninsula. So anyway, thanks very much, everybody. I am Steve Warnicki. This is the Steve Warnicki Show. We appreciate you being with us. Get your copy of From Boy to Blue. And otherwise, we'll be over at stevewarnicki.com with podcasts, articles, and more. We'll see you next time.